morning. This is Rob Arnold, Superintendent of Schools, and I'm coming to you today because we would like to present our Roadmap to Return document and plan to the public. This document will help us safely return to school in the fall. We presented this plan at our school board meeting last night, and now we'd like to present it to the public. Before we get started, I'd like to thank a few people. First, I'd like to thank this community. I'd like to thank this community for their support and their efforts and all of the grace that you provided us as we have kind of learned how to do some very different things on the fly. And so we appreciate that, and we look forward to your continued support. Also like to thank the task force that was put together to put this document together. It's a massive document, very detailed document that took a lot of time and a lot of effort, and we had close to 70 people work on this document. They came from all parts of our community. They came from our schools, and so we feel like we've been well represented. This county has been well represented in this plan. We also had a town hall in which 400 community members participated and gave feedback so we could develop this plan. And we did a student survey where we had 70% participation rate on that survey. And so we had a lot of information to work with. And so this is the document that has come from that. And so let me start by talking a little bit about the kind of conditions that we're under. And so the governor of Virginia has said that we will return to school this year, except that we will return under certain guidelines and restrictions. And so we want to talk a little bit about that, and want to say that in the survey that we put out, got some feedback from families, and part of the survey asked, would you be willing to come back to school? Would you full time? Would you like some sort of hybrid schooling, or no face-to-face interaction, everything distance learning? And so the results we got from that were, we had about 20% of our responders tell us that they would not want to return and they would want to do it all virtually. We had 40% say that they just wanted to come back to school. And then the other 40% were either hybrid or undecided. So I think what that should tell you is that we have people on in a lot of different places in their thoughts about the safety of their children and the need to come back to school. And so we have some people that want to bring the children back right now. We have some people that don't want to bring their child back to school until there's a vaccine. And so there's a lot of room in between there. And so part of this plan is to try to bring all of that together and try to understand the issues that families face. And so the first thing I want to do is make sure that we can all agree upon some common themes. And so we've come up with 3 common themes that this plan is based on. And so let's talk a little bit about these. First and foremost, and as a parent, I have a child. I send my child to school, and the baseline of my expectation is that my child comes home safely every day. And I know that's the same expectation that every parent has. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that this plan is about the safety and the well-being of our students and our staff. I think there's been a lot of conversation recently in the news about the impact that COVID-19 has on our students and how impacted they are. But I think it misses some of the conversation about the staff that we have in our buildings too. And so we want to make sure that we assure that our staff is protected as well, because we have 700 staff members in Amherst County, and it's our responsibility to keep them safe as well. The second thing I think we can all agree upon is that school is the best place for our students to learn. I think connection with adults, with professional teachers is important, and it helps the learning process for our students. understanding though that some folks are not going to be comfortable with that. And so we will have distance learning opportunities available. And the final common belief, and this is a belief whether you agree with it or not, it is the what we are dealing with. And so the public school, the fact that Amherst County is a public school, we have guidelines that the Virginia Department of Education and the governor's phase guidance document set forth for us to follow. Now, in recent weeks, they've all come out and said that these are just guidelines. School board can make their own decisions. Well, the fact of the matter is that these guidelines come from the CDC, and the understanding is that if we don't follow the guidelines from the CDC, the school system becomes liable for any thing that might happen with students and staff getting ill. And so in fact, then those guidelines do become what we must follow, and we will follow those. And so those are the three things that you can think about as we talk about this plan. And so the plan, when you see it, and I'll show you how to get to that information once we get through this presentation, but the plan is a large plan. And if you read it, we want you to read it, we want you to spend time with it, but there are many parts of the plan that are kind of internal, that help our staff start to prepare. It helps our administrators start to think about the things that they have to get prepared. So what I thought I would do today, and what I did last night to the school board, was give the kind of the larger ideas that I think are most important and what families and community want to know about. And so I'm going to go through those things. It certainly won't cover everything in the plan, but I'm going to give you the opportunity then to go see that. So let's start with the first thing I've talked about, and that's the safety of our students and our staff. And so I think what we all have to be aware of is that there are physical risks that are in play here. They're the least amount of risk that we can bring to your child is if your child stays at home and does the online option only. That's the best way we can keep your child safe. The most risk is on the other end of the spectrum, is that everybody comes back to school. We're all face to face. We don't have any strategies to mitigate that. And so our job in this plan is to find some places in the middle to how to reduce the risk as much as possible, but still to try to provide some in-person learning opportunities. So when we think about this word mitigation strategies, what we're really talking about is what are the things that we can do that the CDC recommends to bring the risk down as people are around each other. And so on the next slide, we'll talk about that. But I want people to understand, and I've had conversations with the Virginia Department of Health, and they will say over and over again, it's while Virginia's doing a great job of keeping the transmission rates low, and we don't have the outbreaks that some of the other states are currently dealing with, they're saying it's not if we get cases, it's when we get cases. And so I want people to understand that there is some element of risk involved with all of this. And so the things that we're going to ask you and your child to do is to help mitigate those risk factors. The other thing that's important for us as far as safety is concerned is our emotional safety. Obviously, we've been out of school a long time. We've been away from normal for a long time. And so students are going to have a really difficult time transitioning back. Our adults are going to have a very difficult time transitioning back. So many of the things that we are going to do when students and staff return are going to speak to the social emotional health of our children before we even get to the academic stuff. The idea is that if we don't have our students and our staff in a good place emotionally and feel that sense of belonging in that community in our school, that learning is not going to happen. And so we got to take care of those things first. So I had mentioned mitigation. And so the mitigation strategies, what you'll see is in the plan, there are two mitigation plans. They're called health mitigation plans, and we're required to submit those to the Department of Ed before we enter into these phases. And so when we come back to school, the plan is to be in phase 3. And so if you'll look in the plan for the health mitigation phase 3 plan, it's a very detailed document, and I'm not going to talk about every single mitigation strategy that we're going to use. I thought I'd pull the ones that I think are going to be most impactful and what you might have the most questions about. And so the first one that you'll continue to hear over and over again is the social distancing. That's 6 feet is the recommendation. You may have heard in recent week, the American Academy of Pediatrics has talked about a 3-foot distance, but that 3-foot distance is only appropriate when a face covering is worn. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But everything we do in our school buildings is going to try to maximize that 6-foot social distancing. So as far as face coverings are concerned, we're not going to require them as long as social distancing can be maintained. But we all understand that that's not going to happen all the time. And so when that 6-foot barrier is broken down, we expect our staff and we encourage our students to put the face covering on at that time. So if you think about in a classroom, that if a teacher's in the front of the classroom and all the students are separated, that no masks need to be worn. But when the teacher moves in to work more individually with the child, we'll want to put those face coverings on to keep both the teacher and the student safe. Now, of course, you might have students that have significant physical needs, and so developmental appropriateness of wearing face coverings will need to be discussed on a case-by-case basis, and also we need to factor in the younger students as well. The other mitigation strategy we want to talk about is symptom screening, and so in phase 3, what we are going to be required to do and what we've been recommended to do is to have home screening. So there will be a document that will be given to parents to ask a series of questions of their child each morning, including taking a temperature in the morning to determine if your child is able to come to school. Our staff will do the exact same thing. And so everybody will have their own responsibility for making sure that they're not either coming to work sick or sending a sick child to school. That is extremely important for us to make sure that we all do our part in screening our children and ourselves. We'll also make sure that hand washing and sanitizing stations are in every class and in common areas. So that will be kind of a very normal procedure that happens every single day. And we want people to know that when surfaces are used, whether it's in a classroom or after you've eaten or used different pieces of equipment, that we will sanitize those. And so all of those strategies, if they're all used in combination, you really can lower the risk. But as long as you can get each of these strategies in place, you feel like you have a really good chance of not spreading any of the disease. And so that's why they're so important, and that's why it's so important to take these mitigation strategies seriously, because if we don't follow these mitigation strategies and we have an outbreak, then we're back to phase 1 and we're back to everybody being at home. And the last thing we want to do is have everybody at home again. And so I really encourage you to, you might have some issues with them, but the fact of the matter is that these things are things that will protect your child and our staff. And so we ask that you take these very seriously. So this is probably the biggest issue, the schedules that we are going to put forward. So for our elementary age students, so pre-kindergarten through 5th grade, we are going to have our students come in, every student Monday through Thursday, will come to school. We will take each school and we will divide them in half. And so you'll have an A group and a B group. And if you look on this document here, what you'll see is that the A group will come to school from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And the B group will be staggered slightly. They will come at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. There's a couple of reasons for the staggering. It is to be able to spread students out and keep social distancing, but it's also the way that we're able to transport our students in, because as you understand that we're going to have some limitations on our buses, and so much fewer students are going to be able to ride our buses each day. So, but what the schedule is going to look like is that you'll be in one of two places each day. You'll either be in a kind of a larger setting where there's hybrid learning going on, where students will have their Chromebook, they will have the ability to work on things like science and social studies. PE will work their way through these hybrid learning areas. We will provide tutoring in these areas. They'll get technology assistance because we want to make sure that all of our students have the appropriate technology to get some of this work done. We will have some of our our specialists come through, like art and library. And so we'll be getting those kinds of things done in a kind of a larger setting, say like in the gym or in the cafeteria or in the library. Those students then will transition to what they would normally call their homeroom teacher. And so those students will go into that class. So let's use the example of third grade. So a third grade student that has a classroom that has 20 students in it. Well, since we've divided that in half, it's going to be 10 students in that homeroom teacher's class for 2.5 hours, and they're going to receive their math and their reading and writing instruction in that class. And so it will be a really focused, individualized learning atmosphere for those students. And so then the B group will just have the opposite schedule. And so that's how we're going to get our students through in the elementary school. When we had our town hall, the number one thing that we heard, especially from elementary parents, is how are we going to handle our childcare? And so our team worked really, really hard to figure out a way to get all of our students in as many days a week as we could. I think if you look in the area, not all schools are able to pull this off. And so I feel really good that we've at least been able to provide 4 days where your child can come to school every day. The Friday, the reason we won't have students in on Friday is there's several reasons. One is if you look at a schedule like this, you quickly realize that the amount of planning that our staff has to do has increased. The type of teaching they have to do is different than they've done in the past, and so they're going to need some professional development. And then we're going to want to have a day where we can clean deeply in our classrooms. Like I said, we will be sanitizing as we go, but we really want to have a day where we can really clean the entire building and get it ready to go for the next week. So those are the elementary schedules. The secondary, which makes up grades 6 through 12. We will have to go on a rotating schedule for them, an A schedule and a B schedule. And so each school will be, like the elementary, divided in half. There'll be an A group and a B group. So on Monday, the A group will be in the school getting face-to-face learning with their teachers. The B group will be at home with their Chromebook for their distance learning. And then on Tuesday, that will switch. And so the A group will then be at home and the B group will be at school. Wednesday, A group will be at home, A group will be at school, B group will be at home. And then on Thursday, the B students come back to school and the A students will be at home. Friday will be used for several reasons. We're going to use Friday to help students that need extra support academically. We're going to use Friday to bring in students that if there's something different that has to happen in the CTE classes that they're taking that require a little bit more time and more hands-on, to bring those students in. We also want to provide Friday for some students that are having difficulty accessing broadband technology at home, so they'll have some time at school to get the appropriate internet access to be able to do their work. So the one thing I want you to think about as we talk about this, so let's look at student A. On Monday, they'll be in class. And so if you're familiar with our schedule, we currently work under a 7-period day. Because 7 periods requires a lot of movement and the CDC is recommending less movement, we're going to move to a block schedule. So the way a block schedule works is that you take 4 classes a day, and in those classes you'll be in there twice as long. So each class you'll be in there an hour and a half. So you'll be able to actually finish that course in a semester. So they'll take 4 courses in the first semester and get full credit for that. And then they'll take 4 courses in the second semester and get full credit for that. But what will happen is say they're in English 10 on Monday, they're with their English 10 teacher. They'll be with that teacher for an hour and a half. They'll do the work that they need to do. And then when they're sent home for the following day for their at-home learning, they will have the appropriate information with them, and it will be designed specifically so our students, when they're at home, can get right into their work at home with very little assistance needed. And so, when we get to technology, I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to do that for those folks that don't have great internet access at home. So one thing that you do need to recognize, which you probably saw before I got there, is that the schedule will be dramatically different as far as time, because we now have more runs for the elementary school. To get all of those students in, it's going to require our buses to run 3 routes in the morning instead of 2. And so that's going to push our time for our secondary students to 10 a.m. and then they will go to 4 p.m. So they'll have a 6-hour day as well, but it will be shifted forward a bit. Let's talk about transportation. And so when I talked earlier, one of the things that we were talking about a month ago was that this 6-foot distance was going to be very difficult in a bus situation, because that was going to require 1 student every other seat. And if we were going to do that, we were only going to be able to have 13 students on a bus. And the 2 schedule plans you saw in the previous 2 slides would not be possible if we were only putting 13 students on a bus at a time. So we received some guidance early this week and I mentioned it from the American Academy of Pediatrics, that said 3 feet can work, which means we can get a student on each seat if they wear a face covering. And so in order to meet our transportation needs, your students' needs to get to school, we're going to allow students to sit on every 1 per seat, unless, of course, they're family members, they can sit next to each other. But the students on the bus will then be wearing a face covering. If they cannot do that, or you don't feel comfortable with that, you're going to have to make arrangements to bring your child to school. But by doing this, we can get 26 students on the bus at a time, and that will help us bring students in. Otherwise, we would be doing a lot more at-home learning. And like I said at the very beginning, our goal is to get as many kids in as many days as possible. And this is the way we can do that with our transportation being as it is. One thing I would recommend at this point, though, is if you have the ability to transport your child to school. That certainly would make things easier, and would get more students in a timely fashion. But we also understand that's not always possible, and so that's why transportation will be provided. I want to talk a little bit about food, nutrition. Obviously, we will continue to provide breakfast, and we'll provide lunch. Be in a large congregated section of a cafeteria where everybody's sitting next to each other. They'll still need to be socially distant, 6 feet apart. make sure that the student's food is in a disposable container. It's covered to keep it warm because you might be going to a cafeteria, picking up food and going somewhere else with it. And if you have the ability, so we don't change money, we don't have a lot of things changing hands. If you have the ability to prepay online, we're going to really encourage that. But we want to make sure that everybody understands that nutrition is, in fact, going to be provided. If you get free and reduced lunch, the days that you're not in school, so in elementary, for example, if you are given free and reduced lunch, on Thursday, you will be given food to take home for Friday because you won't be at school on Friday. The secondary schools will have that kind of that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday rotation. But the days you're not at school, you'll be allowed to take food home the previous day. So you'll have those lunches and that breakfast for the following day. And so that's how nutrition's going to work. We'll keep that going. Technology, which on our town hall was the second greatest area of concern in our community. And it is, in fact, because 35% of our students don't have high-speed, reliable internet, and that makes at-home learning very difficult. And so here's how we're going to handle that. And so we're going to give every student, kindergarten through 12th grade, a Chromebook. We'll make sure that everybody has a Chromebook to use. If you don't have reliable high-speed internet, here are your options. Like I stated before, we will, the day before you're not in school, we will download materials onto your Chromebook or onto a flash drive if you don't have internet access. We have still available our school parking lots where you can drive up and you can get internet access that way. We have mobile hotspots in 6 areas across the county that are on buses that will be in place in the areas that we did food distribution this summer. So you can drive up to those parking lots and get internet access there. We're currently working on grants that will provide us with individual hotspots. If students need an individual hotspot to take to their home, we're working on that. And as you've heard over and over again, we're working with lit communities who their goal in the fall is to get some sort of signal out to all of our homes for our students, so internet can be accessed by all of our students. But that's a fall project, and we're working really hard to get to that point. But in the meantime, those options above on the slide are what we can use. We are going to use virtual platforms. What that means is that when students are at home and they're accessing their courses, we are going to use some platforms that will help with that. And there's one platform called Virtual Virginia. It's been around a while. So if you have high school age students, you might have had a student that has taken a course on Virtual Virginia. But all of the courses that we will teach this year will be on Virtual Virginia. So if you're doing the stay-at-home only option, that's how you'll take your core courses. Your electives will be done by using Google Classroom. The reason we have to use Google Classroom for electives is that for Virtual Virginia doesn't carry electives in their coursework. So what the good thing about Virtual Virginia is that the curriculum that is being taught on Virtual Virginia is the same curriculum that's going to be taught in the classroom. So whether you're at home or whether you're at school, you'll be getting the same materials. And so our teachers have been trained on Virtual Virginia or are getting trained on Virtual Virginia, and we will spend a significant amount of time as we come back to school to train your students on how to use these things as well. So that's the technology. And then the childcare, of course. And so the first is for our staff. And so many of our staff members are going to have issues because we have a staggered schedule now that their students, their school-age students might not be going to school the same time their parents are going to school. And so for our staff members that are listening, we are working on a plan right now to make sure that we will provide childcare on the days before and after school that you need them, and then for our elementary staff on those Fridays, or for our elementary students on those Fridays when they're going to be at home. And so that's the childcare for staff. And we have worked with a childcare team across the community for our other students and parents to provide options for them. We've talked to religious churches. We've talked to churches and their access. We've talked to private daycare providers. We've talked to Department of Social Services. So there are a lot of groups that are working to put together some resources for parents. And now that you know the schedules, you can start to reach out to these people. And we'll start to give you some more information on how you can find some childcare for your children. The last area I'm going to touch on is extracurricular. I know that many people are interested in whether your child's going to be able to play sports, or going to be in the band, or going to be able to act, and all of the things that we know are really important for our students to keep them engaged in things that are beyond academics, and they're really important. One of the things that you have to realize is that the seasons and the competitions that could be occurring, that's not been decided on. The Virginia High School League, they've had several meetings about whether they're going to do have competition seasons this year. They should be meeting on July 15th to make that decision. I think specifically about fall sports, but one thing I want to temper people's expectations. If you look at the NBA or Major League Baseball or college football, these professional leagues in these colleges, they have enormous amounts of resources. They have billions of dollars at their disposal, and they're having a very difficult time making it happen. So I just want to temper expectations that it might not happen right away, but I think the plan that the high school league will come out with will address it in some way. That doesn't mean if we don't have if we don't have a season, that doesn't mean we won't provide activities. Our mitigation plan allows for our students, and as a matter of fact, we currently have students at the high school in band, in football, and volleyball. We have students that are doing conditioning that are following the guidelines that have been set forth in our mitigation plans. And so we are making sure that our students are staying safe, and they're going to be actually asked to be 10 feet apart. And that's the guidance from CDC there. So I wanted to give some of that information on extracurricular. As we know, we'll get back in touch with you on those things. So those are the big areas that I think you'll have questions about. What I'm going to do now is kind of show you a timeline of how we're going to move about. Obviously, today is the release of the plan to the public, today, July 10th. In the next 4 days, we're going to ask you to access the document, and attached to this video will be some links for you. You can go to our website, and the link to the plan will be on there. We want you to read it. We want you to spend time with it. We understand that the things that I've told you aren't going to make everybody happy. We understand that. There's no way we can do that. But we want you to read it. We want you to take some time with it. And then we have a document for you. It's a Google form that you can access on our website, and we'll also give you the links to those when we put this video out, that will allow you to go in and put some questions in. And so over the next 4 days, we're going to accumulate those questions, and then we're going to ask you to come back on Wednesday and Thursday of next week to a Zoom meeting. So on July 15th, we're going to take all the elementary specific questions, and I'm going to answer those questions. I'm going to provide more detail as you need the detail. So we'll collect those. I will report out on those questions and give you as much information as we can possibly give you. I want to remind you, I guess I'm getting used to doing these videos, and I think it's important for me to be able to give you as much information as I possibly can. There's nothing that we're trying to hide from this community. We want to work with you. We want to hear from you, and we want to be able to give you some greater bits of information so you can make decisions as you move forward. So on Wednesday of next week, we'll ask that elementary parents come to a Zoom meeting. We'll get the information out to you on that, but that'll be 7 o'clock. The following night on Thursday, we'll ask the secondary, grades 6 through 12, to come to the same thing. I'll go back a day. Next Tuesday, Randy Pirtle, who is the executive director of Blue Ridge Medical, is agreed to sit down with me, and we're going to have a conversation on Facebook Live, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of these mitigation strategies from a medical perspective. I think it's very important because there's lots of information that's out there. There's lots of opinions about what does and what does not work. And I thought it would be important for a medical professional to kind of give some advice to parents and let them understand from that perspective so you can feel more comfortable about the decisions that you're going to need to make. And then the following Monday, we're going to sit back down with our school board and really work through that document with them so they understand completely as well. So those are the things that we're going to do. When this video goes out, when it's over, you'll see in the description when we've sent this out, the 2 links that you'll need. So there's a link to get to our website so you can access the plan itself. It's a rather large document. And then the feedback form or the questionnaire. And so we really look forward to hearing from you. We want to know what you need to know more information about. I mean, the things that I've presented today are my beliefs about what you want to know more about. But there's clearly more things in that document that you're going to be interested in and want to have more information on. And I'm glad to give that information out. So that's the plan. Those are the high points of the plan. And if you have questions, make sure you fill out that document, and we'll be sure to answer those the following week. But we do want to give you some time before we start rushing to answering questions, because we want to make sure that you've had time to deal with the document itself. And I really encourage you to take some time with that over the weekend and the beginning part of next week, and to fill out some of those questions. That is all for today. I want to thank you again for your patience. I want to thank you for sitting through this and listening to this. I said last night, and I'm going to say it again, Amherst County Public Schools, I believe in the last 4 months, has shown a willingness to do whatever it takes to do the very best for our children. And I think we've become leaders in this area as a school system. I feel very proud of the effort that our school system has given. I feel very proud of our community at large. We've really done a great job dealing with all of this. And because of that, I want you to trust that we are going to give you the same effort and the same transparency, and make sure that moving forward in these uncertain times, that we are going to do the very best we can by your child, from a safety standpoint and from an academic, trying to get back to as normal a place as possible. So thank you for being patient. Thank you for your grace and kindness as we've gone through this. And I will be talking to you again next week. But until then, stay safe. Thank you.